everybody. My name is Penda James, and I'm a scribe coach. What I do is I assist people to get unstuck, execute their goals, and inscribe their legacy. What you are watching is what I call the Resilience Project. This has been a series of chats with people that I care about to help remind me of the tools that I have to be resilient. And I want to share these chats with you all so that I can introduce my friends to my friends so that we can all do awesome work in the kingdom together. So today I am talking to someone who is very special to me, to the point that when her feelings are hurt, I feel it. And one time I was so hurt, I fell down in the puddle of tears in the kitchen after she told me about a deep hurt that she had. And I didn't even realize how much I loved her until that moment. She is a prayer partner. She's a sister. She's a former Miss Wilberforce University. And so everybody, this is Dr. Crystaline Barger. So I call her my roadie because we travel sometimes together. And I just really love that term, roadie, like let's get on the road, roadie. So, but it means that when I'm in some of the deepest, darkest roads, I know that my roadie is going to be praying for me, and I'm never alone because she always going to call up the angels on my behalf to fight. So, Dr. Barger, is there something that I did not say that you want our viewers to know about you?
Oh, wow. You covered really it all. I don't know why my voice is that high pitched, but you really covered it all. You're my sister, you're my soror, you're my roadie. We attended the same HBCU together, the Wilberforce University. And awesome because I used to hear your name mentioned on campus, and you graduated the year I came in. But we didn't meet until I graduated in the same city in Pittsburgh. So definitely a lot of history even before we met. So awesome.
Yeah, I'm great. Like it just shows me how God knits us together, and like he knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb. So even coming to Pittsburgh, I'm hearing your name like, you went to Wilberforce, you need to meet Crystaline. She was a former Miss Wilberforce, you know. And so I would see you singing, and you have the highest raptor's voice sometimes when you're singing. So that's amazing to me. And I'm grateful for you being in my life. And so I want you to share what it means on this declaration. I show up and then God shows up. So can you define what that means, Rhodey?
Absolutely. So when we talked about, what is your kind of like, I don't know if I want to call it a mantra, if we should call it a mantra, but who is Crystaline? What describes Crystaline? We came up with a couple of items. But when we mentioned when I show up or I show up, I thought about it and I said, well, throughout my life and different ways that I'll describe, that's true. It really is true. And when I confirmed it with you, I said, I agree with the I show up part. And then I was like, but not so much that I show up, God shows up. Because a lot of the times where it has been said, it can be said about me, and where I agree that it's said about me, it's been times where God just took my obedience and just ran with it. Like he just really showed up in a big way. And so when you ask me the question, how do I define show up? It's been willing for God to direct, whether that be speak through, pray through, or to direct me to move in a particular way. And after doing that, he does with it what he wants to do. And then I learn about it, or I even witness before my eyes what it is that he's doing. But it was a result of obedience. It was a result of feeling that move to be daring and do something that I was sensing, I was discerning, I was feeling, and God took it, and it became evident that he was moving in it. I tend to be a very quiet person for the most part. I would say even more so than quiet, an observer, because I care very much so about what I say, how I say, and when I say, because that's important to me. I'm a social worker by trade. And so caring for people, and being mindful of our words matter, that even comes out in when I define show up. And so, I know we'll talk about it even more so, but when I think about showing up, that's what that means to me, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. So we were joking, and I I was joking with you, and I was just like, Dr. Crystaline Barger, you like come to the table, And so when you responded and you talked about, yeah, I show up, but God shows up. To me, I think about if you come and you are a willing vessel for God,
Yeah.
when you show up, when you come to the table, you know that what happens is not the result of you. And that really is your whole life. Like that really is how you live, is how you do ministry, is how you serve in every way. You never say, I am Dr. Crystaline Barger
It
coming
still
to the
makes me
table.
laugh.
I'm going to say Dr. Crystaline Barger as many times as I can while we're talking, because
And I'll
that's
probably get it
important to
every
me.
time.
Because I know that that's not something that you will do for yourself. And so, because I know, I was part of your committee, and I know how hard you worked. I was in prayer with you before you applied. So as often as I can, I'm going to say Dr. Crystaline Barger. And so when I was talking and we were kind of, prepping for our chat today, I was thinking like, yeah, I want Dr. Crystaline Barger to show up. And of course, in your fashion, you put God first. And so I love that. Like you're one of the most humble women that I know in my life. And you always put God first. So can you talk a little bit about what it means, or how God has been a thread throughout your life showing up when you showed up?
Wow. So in thinking about that, a lot of stuff came up. We might spend a little bit more time than this video is slated to take, but I won't do that. But one of the very first memories I have is my mother said that on Easter Sunday, I want to say it was 1987. I should look at my baptismal certificate before I came on, but I believe it was Easter 87. We had to take a cab to church that morning.
Okay.
And I slightly remember, but we took a cab a couple times, but I remember this memory of me having on white socks with the ruffles
Yes.
around them. And we typically wore those, my sister and I, for Easter. But I remember those in patent leather black shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see myself, just my leg and my foot slide across a blue seat, which was a Lincoln yellow cab when I was younger.
Okay.
And it was raining. And I remember, getting out of the cab. I don't like being wet with my clothes on, so I definitely remember when it's raining. But that happened. I remember that. But that Sunday, I sat up in the balcony, because my friends and I always sat up in the balcony. And I remember having a conversation with God in the balcony before my pastor opened the doors of the church or gave the invitational. And I remember the sun was shining through the panel window. And I forgot what they're called. It's slipping my mind, but through the panel window in the balcony, and it was colored glass. So, it was shining, very pretty.
Stained glass windows.
Stained glass window. And I was having a conversation with God, and I said, I want to invite you into my heart and my life, which is what my pastor will repeat every Sunday, because I believe that I need you for the balance of my journey. You know who people are, you know what I'm going to experience, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I just know I can't face that stuff without you being with me. And so I want, you to be in my life. And I remember that conversation I had with God. And then I got up and I went down the steps, and you had to go down the balcony steps and then in a couple of steps and into the sanctuary, the main sanctuary, the bottom part of the sanctuary. And when you got to the door, of course, that was the middle aisle. And
Oh,
so in front of everybody on Easter Sunday, I started my trek right on down the aisle, to take my pastor's hand and tell him that I had accepted Christ in my heart. My godmother was in to the left side, the back of the church. She pulled me into her pew and she was like, "Where are you going?" Because I was only like 7. So she, tried to pull me into it, and my pastor saw it and he said, "Let her go. She's coming. Let her go." My mom you just heard this squeal and this worship happening in the choir stand because she was singing. She just went up in worship. But she later told me that morning while getting out of the cab, I told her what I was going to do. And she said she didn't ask me. She told me what she was going to go do. And then when I looked down that aisle during the invitational or the opening of the doors of the church, here she comes. And so that's been Crystaline. So when she decides she's going to do something, then you might as well look out, because then she's going to do it. And so when I think about, showing up, I was one of the first of my friends to accept Christ. I didn't have conversations with anybody. I didn't discuss that with my mom. I didn't discuss that with a Sunday school teacher. I decided what I was going to do, and that's what I was going to go do. And so that's one of the earlier remembrances I have. And I'll give you a couple more, and then one of them will be one that you also can attest to as well. But I was held back in kindergarten. And I remember the day that my mother and my father had a conversation with my kindergarten teacher, and then they came and got me. I was playing with the toys, and then we went home. And then I remember coming back the next year, and I remember being on the round carpet where we used to practice our ABCs. The ABCs were listed around the room like a border. And I remember singing songs, and I knew the second year all of the songs and all the ABCs. And I remember saying to myself, I already know all this stuff. Why do I have to sing this again? I already know this stuff. But I was quiet, and
okay.
it was determined that I wasn't ready. I wanted to be back in home daycare. Miss Cox is who used to care for us. No, that wasn't true. But she didn't know that. And so I remembered that. And I remember having a conversation with friends in middle school. And I said, the people my age are a year ahead of me. They're already in high school. Like, I probably hurt their poor feelings. But I was like, my age group is in high school, and I'm back here in 8th grade. I remember having a fit during lunch. I remember that day. But it was a conversation I had held, since, I was younger. And used to I probably drove my mom crazy, but I think it began to make sense when this happened.
Okay.
In high school, my counselor came around to sign us up for, I believe it was either sophomore year or junior year of classes. I only went to high school 3 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it was freshman, sophomore, and then I call it my junior/senior year because of this.
Okay.
And so when she came around, I signed up for my classes, and then I said to her, her name was Miss Betts. I said, "Miss Betts, I would like to graduate in 96 instead of 97. What is it that I need to do in order to graduate in 96 and 97? I was already on a college track, and so
Okay.
I was kind of ahead anyway. As far as that track was concerned, I was not an A student. I did graduate with a 3.2, I believe is what it was, but wasn't an A student. And so wasn't in high honors classes or anything like that. I was average. But I said that to her, and her response to me was, "Well, go home and talk to your parents, think about it, and then, come back and we'll have a conversation about it." I didn't need to talk to anybody. I had already determined what needed to happen. Now I needed to know if it was possible.
Right.
This ain't a conversation we need to have. My mom and dad already knew. And so I went home, all right, and I wrote her a letter. I wrote her a letter, and I went to school. And I remember Miss McGee was in our high school office. She's a African American lady, wonderful lady. She'll probably see this on Facebook. Who worked in the office at my school. She was an administrative assistant at my school. And so I went into the office, and I, said hello to Miss McGee, and I said, "May I give Miss Bet something?" And she was like, "Sure, honey, go on and put it on her chair." And I put it on her chair. There was no conversation that happened after that. Next thing I knew, I have had books. I was called to the office to receive my books for 2 correspondence courses out of Chicago.
Wow.
Originally from Springfield, Illinois. And so the correspondence school was in Chicago. And so I learned Shakespeare on my own through that class. And I think I had a math class. And I walked across the stage on June 10th, 1996. So
Wow.
this is not a discussion. I already heard it. I already knew what I need to do. Let's ride. Um, and so that's one way. And then God has a way of, I believe that was a testament for some reason that God has. I think both of those were.
Yeah.
And my friends trickled down in accepting Christ, soon after that. I guess God used me to break the ice to do that.
Mm.
And then just that assurity at times that, okay, God said it. What's the discussion? This is what needs to happen. Um, but then also there's been times where I would be invited to meetings. I was on the committee, was not on the committee, but I would be in the room. I remember one meeting at Wilberforce, and after I become Miss Wilberforce, I was invited to a meeting, and I think it maybe was like SGA or something like that. I wasn't on SGA. I was in Wilberforce University Choir,
Mhm.
and that really was the gist of the bulk of what I did at Wilberforce, because they had a rigorous schedule. But I remember after that meeting, a couple of people came up to me afterwards and they said this meeting was way different than other meetings. There was peace in the room and we
Mm.
were able to accomplish what we needed to accomplish. So the bickering, the arguing, things of that nature that happened didn't happen. And I can remember on a couple of occasions, I would be in spaces where God would immediately call my attention to discord and disorganization, but also people not feeling comfortable speaking up or giving their thoughts. And he would give me exactly what to say that would cut right through the thickness in the room.
Mhm.
And so when you say, say to me, God, I show up, but then God shows up. Just those instances where that type of thing happens. And so there's an instance that you and I share, where just in a room, and discussing amongst friends and really talking about unpluckable faith and your first book and things of that nature, and just felt the need to pray, and so prayed. And as you all tell it, God showed up in the room. And so just out of obedience, there have been, during a time where I can't give specifics about this particular time, but those who may be watching will remember very well. But again, that thickness in the room, kind of fear, kind of, we
Mhm.
know this, we don't want to, we know this, but we're messing up. And I asked permission to pray. And I prayed. And when I tell you that God snatched everybody in the room, including those that were kind of making us fearful, and not because I did anything other than I felt something ain't right. We know this stuff. What is this? And so I know that when I pray for myself in instances that I get peace, it must work here too. This needs to happen here too. And so prayed, and when I tell you, everybody's snotting and crying and laying on the ground. Even people that I didn't even know knew God. Not that I needed to know they knew God, but
Yeah.
and again, not a testament to me, because it's not about me. It's really not about me. It's about being obedient, even when it seems weird, even when it seems peculiar, even when it's different, even when it's opposite of what others are doing around you, but knowing that weight's not on you for no reason.
Yeah. I wanna just talk a little bit about that day when we had the prayer breakfast for Girl Pray for Me, which is actually my second book for you, those of you all who are watching. And I had a draft manuscript that I presented to like 21 women. And when you submit it to the will of God to pray, it changed not only the atmosphere in the room, but it opened up for me the confirmation that what God had given me was real. And so, I called you and said, if it weren't for you, and Kelly, if she watches, if it wasn't for Kelly, who read every single word every single day, I would write something and send it to her, and every single day she responded until Girl Pray for Me became what it is. And so when I think about the culmination of all of that, it's when I submit myself to God and say, okay, I'm going to go,
Mhm.
he shows up. and there's nothing I can do about it. Sometimes, when things happen and we're in ministry, like we even forget, what happened in the room. We don't know what happened in the room because God takes over. And so I've
Which is what we
seen
want him to do.
even in situations like that. And, I remember you pacing and praying, praying and clapping, and so I just think that's so powerful. So what do you want people to know about showing up so that God can show up? But if you can frame it in a way that you give them tools so that they know how to do that. And me too, because I'm listening.
And tools. Let's see. Well, and sorry, because I'm gonna have to read this. So I know you didn't want me to read anything. It's kind of scripted, but I think it's scripted for a reason. And then we'll go from there. But when God speaks through us and moves through us, it is always is to accomplish what God set out for it to accomplish. And this is what we want. If we as believers stop allowing God to speak his love, care, authority, correction through us, this world is in trouble. It can be uncomfortable, peculiar at times, and there is a season at the beginning where you will mess up and speak out of sequence or speak out of your flesh, yet it is okay. God will correct it and work for your good and for his glory. But it must be done so that the brokenhearted, the downtrodden can have a voice, and atmospheres can be shifted so that all can be heard and so that God can be experienced. This world thinks it can make it without God and encounters with God, but we can't. We need God. He is all knowing, all powerful, and everywhere. He knows what is really going on in the hearts of men, in minds, mentalities, perceptions, fears, concerns, desires, principalities, and spiritual wickedness, etc. He knows how to work in, around, and through all of us. And so for me, when hearing God is, when we talk about tools, a relationship with God, number one, is important. That's the groundwork from being able to hear God. But even outside of that, when you see wrong and you have in your heart, you sense it in your heart to right it or to do something that helps for change, I believe that that's something too. And that happens knowing God and not knowing God, but doing the right thing. But for me, as a woman of faith and a woman of belief, comes from believing that God is, believing that he has gifts, and that he endows his people with the gifts that he wants them to have, and saying yes to the gifts, and then accentuating the gifts. Learn about the gifts, have conversations with people about the gifts, and allow yourself to become comfortable in the gifts. It comes from me, started with prayer, started with reading the word, and learning God. I grew up in Sunday school, and not that you have to do all this, because as adults, if you accept Christ as an adult, you don't have the formative years of Sunday school, but you have, church services, you have Sunday school at your church, but you also have your personal quiet time with God, where you are reading the word, where you are praying to God, you're having that honest conversation with him. And as you have that conversation, the Bible says that in the presence of the Lord is the fullness of joy, and in his right hand are pleasures forevermore. The Bible also speaks about how he opens up gifts when you're in his presence. And so in that time, when you are committed to him and you are focused on him, he begins to do in you what he wants to do. So whether that is just speak, whether that is, change your mind by the transforming of your mind, he begins to do, he'll do all the leading, but it's a matter of will we be yielded to it. So it's a yielded spirit, if that all makes sense, hopefully.
It all makes sense. It all makes sense. And it's fine that you read it. I wouldn't expect anything else from Dr. Crystaline Barger, because I know you studied and you were at the, God's feet, listening to him to make sure that you said the right thing. So that's okay. Is there anything else that you want the viewers to know about showing up so that God can show up, in any final words?
Oh, wow. I'll say thank you for this opportunity to hang out with you, my roadie.
Yes.
And engage. And I'm glad that you see me as a humble person. I really hope that indeed that was conveyed through this. It's not about, for me, it's not about being perfect, but it's about being yielded. And very important to me to be perceived as humble. That it's not about putting my name out there. Hearing doctor definitely makes me giggle.
I
It still
know.
does. But wanting people to have a relationship with God and wanting the narrative about a relationship with God to change. A lot of mockery, a lot of spooky, a lot of weird and strange instead of peculiar. We hear about those pieces happening, or hear about those definitions coming from the world, and even from some of those in the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And that narrative needs to change because that's not the God that we serve. He uses ordinary people to do extraordinary. And I just think that the experiences he's allowed me to have is proof positive, ordinary people doing the extraordinary.
And that's why I call this the Resilience Project, because I've learned, being in the position of leadership that I am in, being married to a pastor, I understand that there are different expectations for Christians, and so it's challenging for me when I want to have some really hard conversations about some really important things that are affecting and impacting me and the people I love, but I can't do it at church. And so, I've experienced that growing up and even now into adulthood. And so thank you for coming to the safe place to have this sacred conversation about being humble and allowing God to use you. And so I appreciate that. You are humble, and I think that everybody who sees this will agree. And so I just really appreciate that you share your heart, because I don't always know if people know how to submit themselves to the will of God. And so the way that you've explained it today is completely different than how I've conceptualized it in the past.
Right.
If God says go and you like, I'm not ready for that, but you know that he's going to use you, all you have to do is go. It's all in your obedience and your submission to him. So thank you, Rhodey, for being here, and thank you all for watching. There's some awesome sacred conversations. If you search the hashtag the Resilience Project, you'll find some of my other sacred conversations with people. So thank you for watching. I love you so much.